No one believed the golden retriever was trying to hurt their toddler, until the truth left them speechless. What looked like obsession was actually the dog's desperate attempt to save their daughter's life. They thought their golden retriever had turned on their daughter. They were completely wrong. Greer pressed his nose against Harlo's face while she stood completely still, not playing, not moving, eyes open, and aimed at nothing. And the dog stood 3 inches from her cheek, not backing away, not blinking, nose working against her skin like he was reading something written there that no one else could see. Nava yanked him back by the collar. He came back the next morning, and the morning after that, every time Harlo went still, Greer was already there, not arriving when it started, already positioned, already watching, like something had told him 20 seconds before the child's eyes went flat. Something was wrong with him. Nava Calloway had caught over 3,000 infants in 11 years of labor and delivery nursing. She understood distress signals. She had read fetal monitors at 3 a.m. with a resident shaking beside her and known before the numbers changed that something was wrong. She understood bodies the way mechanics understand engines, not from textbooks, but from the accumulated weight of being right when it mattered. She understood with that same certainty what a dog pressing its face against an 18-month-old looked like. It looked like a problem that was going to get worse. The first time it happened was a Tuesday in October. Harlo standing in the center of the living room, gone still, eyes open but focused nowhere. The soft drift that toddlers do when something internal catches their attention. Ordinary on its own. But Greer was already there when Nava looked up, chin lifted, nose forward, pressed to the child's cheek, not sniffing in the casual way dogs investigate things, working deliberately. The way an instrument works when it is measuring something. Nava called Harlo's name. Nothing. Called it again. Harlo blinked, turned, arms rising toward her mother. Completely normal. The moment gone as fast as it arrived. Nava pulled Greer back by the collar and felt the low resistance of a dog that did not want to be moved, but accepted it anyway. She told herself it was nothing. But Greer did not move for 4 more minutes after that. He stayed facing the empty spot on the carpet where Harlo had been standing, nose still working, head slightly lowered. The child had already walked to the other side of the room, and he was still reading whatever the air above that patch of floor contained. That image lodged somewhere behind Nava's sternum and stayed there. By the second week of November, Nava had counted 9 separate incidents, and had not written the number down because writing it made it a pattern, and a pattern meant she had to do something about it. Each time the same sequence. Harlo would slow, then stop, eyes open and unfocused. 10 seconds or 30 or sometimes nearly a minute of that wrong stillness. And Greer would already be there, not reacting to the stillness, already in position before it began. Nose to her cheek or her neck or pressed below her ear, reading whatever signal was arriving in that skin, while the rest of the house saw nothing unusual at all. She watched it happen on a Saturday afternoon with her husband Darren sitting on the gray sofa 3 feet away, a parts manual open on his knee. Not looking up, Greer pressed forward toward Harlo's face. Nava grabbed his collar and pulled him back hard enough that he skidded on the hardwood. Darren looked up. He keeps getting in her face every time she zones out, Nava said. It's probably resource guarding, Darren said. He's never had to share the house with a toddler before. Give him time. She called her friend Petra that evening. Petra had spent 4 years as a veterinary technician and spoke about animal behavior with the confidence of someone who had seen a great deal of it. Sounds like anxiety to me, Petra said. Big dogs fixate on small children sometimes. It reads as dominance. Classic territorial response. Nava wrote nothing down, but she filed the explanation because Petra had delivered it without hesitation. And certainty from someone else feels like relief when you are running on broken sleep and postpartum anxiety and a clinical brain that will not stop cataloging things it cannot explain. She was wrong to file it. She would understand that later. But she filed it. And for 11 days, she watched Greer closely and told herself she was monitoring the situation and not simply delaying a decision she didn't want to make. By the 4th week of November, Greer had stopped sleeping by the radiator. He was sleeping outside Harlo's door. 4 paws on the hardwood threshold, chin flat against the floor, body oriented toward the gap at the bottom of the door. Nava found him there at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday and stood in the hallway in the dark and looked at him for a long moment. He didn't lift his head. His nose was working up the gap, slow, continuous, reading the air that came from inside the room where her daughter slept. She stepped over him, stood in the nursery doorway. Harlo asleep on her back, arms loose, breathing regular, the monitor light steady green, everything exactly as it should be. She went back to bed and lay awake for 40 minutes. The next morning, she told Darren they needed to move the baby gate to the hallway. He's making it worse, she said. He keeps positioning himself like something terrible is about to happen and nothing is happening, and I can't sleep with him acting like that every night. Darren moved the gate without argument. He trusted her read. She was the one with the medical background. She was the one who understood bodies. Greer sat on the other side of the gate and did not protest. He did not bark. He did not pace or scratch or whine. He simply lowered himself to the floor, pressed his nose to the gap between the gate and the hardwood, and aimed it at the door down the hall. He stayed there all night. Every night after, watching through the slats in the only direction that mattered to him. Nava lay in the dark and told herself she had handled the problem. She had not handled anything. She had installed a barrier between her daughter and the one thing in the house that knew what was happening and called it a solution. December 3rd, a Monday, 11:14 in the morning. Nava was in the kitchen, monitor propped against the backsplash, coffee running. Harlo was in the living room with a board book, audible through the doorway, the soft sound of cardboard pages turning. Greer was on the other side of the gate, quiet, watching the kitchen doorway with that flat, focused attention that Nava had spent 6 weeks trying to diagnose and redirect and contain. 3 minutes passed. She came back with her mug. Harlo was standing in the center of the carpet, still, eyes open and aimed at the middle distance, hands at her sides, the board book on the floor where it had dropped. But the color around her lips was wrong. Not blue. Nothing so clear as that. A pallor at the edges, a particular flatness to the pink, the kind of color that Nava's clinical brain recognized from a different context entirely, from a delivery room, from a moment before a number changed on a monitor, and filed under a category it had no civilian name for. Her mother's brain filed it under something that had no language at all. Just wait. Just cold. Just the specific way your hands go before the thought completes. She said Harlo's name. Nothing. Said it again. Louder. Harlo blinked once and turned toward her mother's voice, arms rising, the moment breaking open like it always did. Color slowly correcting, expression returning, completely normal the way she was always completely normal. The moment after, Nava stood holding her daughter and felt her own pulse in her throat. Then Greer made a sound. In 47 days he had been silent. Not one bark, not one whine, not one sound in 7 weeks of watching and waiting and pressing his nose to every gap that was available to him. The sound he made now was not a bark. It was low and continuous, almost below hearing, the kind of sound that bypasses the ears and registers somewhere older. It had no urgency in it, no panic. It was the sound of something that had been patient for a very long time and had finally reached the end of patience. Nava moved the gate with one hand. He walked directly to Harlo, no hesitation, pressed his nose below the child's left ear and held it there absolutely still, the way he had always been still, not frozen, not afraid, but reading. Still reading. After 47 days of being moved and gated and dismissed, still doing the only thing he had ever been doing. Nava called the pediatrician. She described the stillness and the frequency and the duration and the color she had seen around her daughter's lips. Her voice came out steadier than she deserved. She said she needed to come in today, not tomorrow. Today. If your dog has ever done something that made no sense until it was the only thing that made sense, tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. The EEG was December 7th. Dr. Priya met Atta, pediatric neurologist at the Children's Hospital, sat across from Nava and Darren in a room with pale blue walls and a window that showed a gray parking structure, and delivered the diagnosis in a voice that had delivered it many times before. Childhood absence epilepsy. Brief electrical disruptions in the brain's activity that interrupt consciousness without convulsion, without falling, without any of the visible signs most people associate with seizure. The child simply goes absent, eyes open, body upright, awareness gone for anywhere between 5 seconds and 2 minutes. Notoriously difficult to detect in toddlers because the episodes are nearly identical to normal developmental drift. Families go months, sometimes longer. She paused. Tell me about your dog, she said. Nava told her everything. October through December, all 9 catalogued incidents, the positioning, the nose against the cheek, the door threshold, the gate, the 47 days of silence, and the one sound on December 3rd when the color changed. Dr. Ma listened without interrupting. When Nava finished, she was quiet for a moment. Dogs have been documented detecting preictal state changes, she said. Chemical and neurological shifts that precede a seizure by up to 45 minutes in some cases. The mechanism isn't fully understood, but the research is consistent. Some dogs are trained for it. Many do it entirely on their own, responding to something their olfactory system detects that we have no instruments sensitive enough to measure. She set down her pen. Another 6 to 8 weeks undetected and we would be having a considerably different conversation. Harlo's episodes were also occurring nocturnally during sleep in a pattern her daytime behavior wasn't showing us. He was monitoring a window you didn't know existed. Nava's hands were in her lap. She looked at them. Greer pressing his nose to Harlo's cheek during every episode of stillness. Not resource guarding, not dominance. Preictal detection, reading a chemical signal in her breath and skin that arrived before her brain's electrical activity visibly disrupted. Greer sleeping at the nursery threshold through all of November. Not anxiety, not territorial behavior. Nocturnal vigil covering the episodes that happened in the dark while everyone slept and no one knew to watch. Greer's 47 days of silence and one sound on the morning the color in her daughter's face crossed a line. Not a malfunction, a threshold. Whatever he had been tracking had entered territory he could no longer hold quietly. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never asked for anything in return. Subscribe so you never miss the next story. They started Harlo on medication December 12th. The episodes slowed within the first week. By the end of the second week they had stopped entirely. The night after the last recorded episode, Nava sat on the floor in the hallway, not on the sofa, not in the chair, on the floor, back against the wall, in the exact place she had found him so many mornings. The place she had stepped over, the place she had decided was the problem. She sat there in the dark and waited. Greer came and stood beside her. He didn't lie down immediately. He stood close enough that she could feel the warmth from his coat, and she put one hand flat against his side and felt his breathing steady and slow, and felt him exhale once, long, the way he exhaled at the end of a vigil. She said one thing, "I'm sorry." He stood still for a long moment, long enough that she felt the weight of it. Then he turned and walked the length of the hallway to Harlo's door. He lay down, chin to the hardwood, nose at the gap, facing in. If this story changed how you see the quiet things your dog does, the watching, the positioning, the following, the staying, share it with someone who needs to see it. He was exactly where he had always been. The quietest guardians are the ones who never asked to be understood, only trusted.